Hey men, welcome to the BraveCo Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Today we're going to do something that I'll probably only do one time. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to unpack who I am, where I came from, and also where I'm heading, and talk about BraveCo a little bit. But I thought you guys could have a real reference to who I am. So I grew up in a little house in a small town in Weaverville, California. And yeah, I grew up in a small town of about 3,000 people, and I love small towns. Growing up in a small town, you have all the advantages of actually knowing your neighbors and people being friendly. And I just really loved being able to go outside my house, ride my bike or my scooter down the street and not have to be supervised all the time. And that was kind of what it felt like to grow up in Weaverville. My house was a lot like growing up on Little House in the Prairie. There was not very many problems. My mom and dad were incredible parents. My dad was a business owner, so he owned parts stores, and he was a mechanic, and he owned a gas station for a long time. And we just did a lot of different things. And my mom worked with my dad all the time. All that I can remember growing up, my mom helped and was a support to my dad. So that was fun. I kind of grew up in like the typical American, like the good life, just that small town feel, white picket fence type of feel, but out in the woods. And so life starts fast when it just feels like life starts fast. Maybe it doesn't now I'm thinking about it. But for me, it felt like life started really fast in the sense that I was so innocent growing up, and growing up in that small, good home. And then, but even growing up in a really good home, felt like I found things like sexuality. I found pornography and masturbation at a really, really young age. And you would think that I would have grown up in a bunch of chaos, or I'd grown up for how caught up I got into the sexual stuff. You would have think that I grew up in maybe a bigger city but I didn't. Even in the 1980s, it's kind of funny because now kids get connected to pornography much, much earlier than kids from my era. But not me. At I don't know, 10 years old, I had already found masturbation. And it wasn't until about probably 10 years ago that I realized I became completely addicted to masturbation as a way to cope with the anxiety that I had as a kid growing up. And it's funny because growing up, I didn't think that I had that much anxiety until I look back as an adult and start to reflect on my childhood and just begin to understand how much pressure I was under. And most of my anxiety was stuff that I had made up in my mind. It wasn't like logical. For instance, a lot of people have anxiety because they grow up in a house that's full of chaos, and not me. I had anxiety. I had lots of fears, lots of phobias, that I wasn't okay, that someone was going to kidnap me, that I had some disease, and I really struggled with that, but didn't know how much of a battle that was. So anyways, when I found masturbation, I found a incredible coping mechanism to the anxious feeling that I carry around all day. And so needless to say, I became completely addicted to that. And at about, 14 years old, I found pornography, which you can imagine, pornography on top of already being addicted to masturbation was just fuel to the fire. And that became a real prison in my life. My parents were so great at taking us kids, and not just taking us to church, but getting completely involved, engulfed into church. And in those days, and even now, I mean, I'm more plugged in than I was back then. We had a really strong church of about 250, 300 people. Bill Johnson was the pastor, and it was just a phenomenal place to grow up. I saw God move so powerfully. My parents were so incredible at just involving God into our everyday life. But it was annoying. When you're a kid, it's super annoying to have to go to church all the time. And I remember asking my parents, specifically my dad, hey, do I have to go to church this week? And my dad would say, no, you don't have to go to church. And I'd be like, yes. And he would say, you get to go to church. And that was the mindset that was sown in, instilled. And I realized at a really young age that not only did my life have purpose and meaning, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but that people needed me. I was on this planet to make a difference. And that's something that my dad really instilled heavily into me. But getting back onto talking about the sexuality stuff, going back a little bit in my life, because I had such a strong foundation with God and history with God, man, it was so conflicting being completely caught up, connected, completely, stuck, trapped in masturbation and pornography. I lived with this conflict that, interestingly enough, I didn't hide. I didn't hide it from my parents, and specifically from my dad. I remember being probably 12 years old, riding in the car on the way home from Reading. We were driving from Reading to Weaverville, which is like a 50-minute drive. And my dad, he would always ask me these crazy, intense, just questions. We would talk about girls a lot, and he wanted to make it normal. He didn't want to make it weird for us to talk about sexuality or girls or dating or how to treat a woman, which was super embarrassing when you're young. But I look back at that now and go, gosh, that's how I made it through all of that sexual exposure at a young age. And my dad asked me, hey, do you know what masturbation is? And I just remember being 12 years old in the car. Like I just like instantly started sweating. I thought I was going to fall out of the car. But I told him, like, yeah, I know what it is. And I've tried it a few times. He didn't know that I was completely addicted, but I tried it a few times. And that started the conversation with my dad about what was really going on in my life. And so come to 14 years old, 14, 15, I'm stuck in pornography, watching pornos with my friends who stole VHS tapes. We didn't even have DVDs then. It was all VHS tapes and Playboy magazines. And I remember every night, my dad would take a bath because he was a mechanic, so his hands would be all dirty. And for years, I would just go sit in the bathroom and talk with him and connect. That was just our normal. I thought every guy did that. And I just remember talking to my dad about pornography and being stuck in pornography and watching late night Showtime on a fuzzy screen. And one night I was so done with it. I'd struggled off and on for about a year with watching it and then not watching, and, Saturday night watching late night Showtime and Sunday morning going to church, repenting and just doing this crazy cycle. And so I'd done a whole bunch of stuff. Finally, my dad, one night, I'm talking to him after work, and he says, hey, what do you think about telling the family? It's cool if you've got older brothers who are also struggling, but I'm the youngest of two other siblings. The older siblings are my sisters, and then I have my mom. So he's essentially saying, hey, what do you think about sitting down your sisters and your mom and telling them what you're going through. And I was like, whew, I don't know. I actually told him, hey, I don't know. Do you think it will work? Like, do you think this is the antidote to what I'm struggling with? And he said, yeah, I do. I think it will help. I think it'll help a lot. And I did. That was one of the most courageous conversations I've had, to let my sisters and my mom in on what I'd been struggling with so deeply for so long. And I remember my sisters got around me that night, and my mom stood around me, and they prayed over me. And that was the beginning of the end of that struggle in my life with pornography. And from then on, from that night on, I realized I need something every day that reminds me of who I am as a man, because we can't expect to break an addiction just through telling, just through being open, just through confessing. Like, I knew that I had to remind myself daily of who I am and what I believe in and why I believe in that. And so I began to wear white shirts every day. I go to school. Now I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm wearing these white shirts every day, which was pretty cool for the first few days. And then my friends started going, dude, why are you wearing white shirts all the time? They thought my mom got like a mega sale at Walmart or something. But I just started to explain to them. I didn't hide it. I have super strong conviction. So I just told them, like, I needed something to remind me of who I am. I was struggling with pornography and masturbation, and I need something every day that reminds me. And that, it worked. That was the changing point, the turning point in my life. And my dad had got me a purity ring, which I wore on my right hand, and I still have it to this day. But again, it was in that season where I needed something to remind me of who I am. So I wore this white shirt, my white shirts and my purity ring. And I didn't care. Like, if a partier at school would ask me, like, hey, what's that ring? I'd tell them, like, oh, this is my purity ring. My parents got it for me. And which basically just means I'm going to be pure. I'm not going to have sex till I'm married. And it's a reminder to me every day. And honest to God, as embarrassing as it was, I never had one kid make fun of me. Most of the time when I would tell somebody, especially the girls, they would kind of look down and be like, I wish that my parents did that. And they were like party girls. So that just, in my life, I give so much credit to where I am today because of the home that I grew up in. I had an incredible upbringing, and all through these different sexual experiences, these different failures in my life and exploration journey in my life, I had incredible parents, which really grounded me. All of my sexual experiences up until I was 16 years old were with guys, all of them. Whether it was, I had oral sex as probably 10 or 11 years old with a friend of mine, and a couple times with a guy friend of mine. And I didn't know it was wrong. I didn't really think twice about it, except for I shouldn't say I didn't know it was wrong. I didn't actually know it was wrong. I felt bad after doing it. Probably like you have before you do something that no one ever told you was wrong, and you just feel kind of dirty. That's how I felt that day. And I came home and talked to my dad. I just told him, like, man, this is what I did. I told him about the oral sex, which I didn't know the word oral sex. I was too young. So I explained what I was doing. And I just remember my dad looking at me being like, oh, yeah, you're super curious. And that's just not something we do. It's not evil to be curious. He also explained that I had a sex drive, which means that I wanted to have sex, but we don't follow our temptations. We don't have to follow our emotions and our temptations, but we can decide to delay that. We can decide to say no to the things that we're tempted to do. And that was the last time that I ever had oral sex with a guy. And then I, would masturbate with my friends and watch porn together and stuff like that. And again, you would think that I would have struggled as a kid with same-sex attraction, or that I would struggle with gender confusion, anything like that. But because I had a dad that was such a strong place of identity and comfort and security in my life, and a mom that accepted me, and I didn't let my temptations literally define who I was. It just became this like, oh, I'm super curious. Oh, I've got a sex drive. Which is really what it is today. That's true about all of us. So we are not the temptations that we chase. We are the values that we embrace. And so that became a powerful place of acceptance and love that I didn't have to hide from my parents. I didn't have to hide from the church. I didn't have to hide from these authority figures in my life. They accepted me honestly for who I am, and then helped to provide clear direction about who I was and how God had made me, and just phenomenal upbringing. And I can't thank my parents enough for that. Fast forwarding a little bit, 16 years old, I met my high school sweetheart, and 17 years old, I got engaged, which a lot of you are like, holy cow. I mean, even me, I'm like, geez. But what else are you going to do in a small town? That's what you do in a small town. I mean, my aspirations were to get married, have kids, be a logger, or work at a mill, because I grew up in a logging town, or somehow work out in the forest, maybe be a Forest Service guy and forester. And so I got engaged at 17, married at 18, just right like August 29th. So I'd graduated high school and got married. I mean, a couple months apart, month and a half apart. And then before my first anniversary, August 23rd, my son Elijah was born. And that just really kicked off a completely different season in my life. I didn't even plan on having kids that young. I guess when you're that young, you don't plan very good. So maybe she skipped, taking the pill, or maybe, I don't know, all the things that were supposed to work didn't work. But I started having kids young. So 19 years old, really. I had my first son, Elijah. And then by the time I was 24 years old, I had 3 kids, Elijah, Riley, and Evan, and was done having kids, had a vasectomy, super young. It's crazy. I definitely wouldn't recommend having kids young. There's a lot of upside or benefit to it. The fact that I'm 41 years old now and my kids are grown and married, my oldest is married, is awesome. I'm going to be a super young grandpa, and being young while my kids were young was awesome because I had tons of energy. The downside to having kids young, obviously, is I wasn't super settled. So what does a 19-year-old know about life? What does a 19-year-old know about raising kids? And I think we did a great job because I had great parents, but man, the learning curve is so steep when you're really, really young. And life was incredible, but also super challenging. I went to the school of ministry. So my parents, I guess I should back up a little bit and say, at 18 years old, my parents moved from Reading. From Weaverville, they went to Reading, and they became associate pastors at Bethel Church, which was awesome. They started a school of ministry there for people all around the country that wanted to come and learn, get closer to God, learn how to prophesy, learn how to pray for the sick, learn some good identity. So they started that school. And at 22, I went through the school of ministry, 2020, I went through the school of ministry for 2 years. So 20 and 21. And then I moved back to Weaverville and became a wildland firefighter, which I loved that job. It was incredible. It got me back out in the woods and behind a chainsaw, hiking every day, playing with fire. That was probably the most incredible, fun job I've ever done in my life. Every day, hiking, hanging out with guys. But that only could last for so long when I had young kids. So I went from firefighting to getting a job at the school ministry, becoming a school ministry pastor. So basically my job was to help lead the students. I had 60 students that were under me that I'd pastor, and that was awesome. I did that for 10 years at Bethel Church, and our school just exploded. We went from having, I don't know, I think when I went there, it was the second year of school, and there was 45 first year students and 24 something second year students. And then by the time I left school ministry, so 10 years later, there was probably 1,500 first year students and 600 second year students, and just thousands of alumni that had gone through it. So man, what those years of pastoring just was so phenomenal. But I had some crazier twists and turns at 27 years old. I don't know if you've ever gone through something where life felt like it was going really good, really smooth. And then before you know it, like one day you wake up and it feels like life's on fire. That's what my life felt like. I ended up going through a divorce at 28 years old. It was the most incredible, like overwhelming pain. Everything was overwhelming. Everything, my whole entire life felt like I was on fire. And it was like this slow motion train wreck that I couldn't stop, even if you tried. And I don't really necessarily want to get into all the details, all the gory details of my past. And not because I'd want to hide it, mostly for my ex-wife's sake, is there was some infidelity, and it was just this tough time of learning how to raise kids, being a single dad. So overnight I became a single dad, and the kids lived with me, especially the first 2 years, the majority of the time, or a lot of the time. And I began to just navigate this crazy season of how do you walk your kids through pain and be a pastor at a church. I wasn't the main pastor, again, at the school ministry, and also work myself through this really painful season in my life. And how do you do all that well at 28 years old? It was just one of the craziest seasons. The truth is that you don't do it well. There's no way to do that well on your own. Which goes back to what I learned as a kid, is that the greatest strength in your life is the community, the family that you have. That's what's going to get you from where you're at today to where you want to be. And those were the years, again, that I learned how vital it is to have my mom and my dad and my brothers and sisters and my friends that could really help to pour into me. There was a lady that was in my revival group, one of my 65 students that I was pastoring, that would do all the shopping for me and my kids. I don't know. She had 5 kids of her own, and she did this just to help me. I was super busy, and I owe that. Jenny Grimes, you know who you are. I owe you so much. And there's just been so many people in my life that were like that came and helped me through a season that there's no way I would have ever made it on my own through that. I had 20 roommates in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years during that time. And those roommates were so key to loving on my kids, and so key to helping create a culture of love and health and peace. And each one of those guys I owe so much to. And in a lot of ways, I could never repay them. which is what life's supposed to be. And it was through that hard time, through the divorce, that I learned how to work through pain, that I learned how to walk through real forgiveness, because up until then, it's just a theory. You know, if you've never gone through a lot of pain, which I've never met someone who hasn't been through a lot of pain, but if you haven't, then it's all theory. And, you know, people say, oh, you just need to forgive. Well, thanks. But how do you do that? That's where I learned like really specific tools and keys to forgiveness and working through pain, which I'll be sharing on this podcast with you guys. But that started it. And then in 2009, I started dating a girl named Lauren, who is now my wife. And it was the most incredible but challenging processes, because she wasn't just dating a single guy. She was dating a divorced guy who has kids and who's a pastor at this church. And so it just was like so intensified, the process. And then us as a dating couple, not speeding it up or moving past any, pushing boundaries, you know, having been married 10 years and then go to not being married. And yeah, so it was just this incredible journey. It really was this incredible journey of learning how to do this dating process again and protect my kids' hearts and really make sure that I like Lauren. I don't just want someone to watch the kids. And it's phenomenal. And her and I, we've been married for going on 11 years this year. It's just been phenomenal. She's the most incredible woman. We've got a great marriage, but it's because of how intentional we were and how we did that season. And maybe I'll do a couple dating podcasts for you guys on BraveCo. It's one of the things that I feel like I'm super good at, because having done it 2 times in my life, not dating two women, but having got married twice in my life, and doing it so well the second time and navigating the challenges. Yeah, I love talking about that. But after I started dating Lauren, I had so overwhelmed myself with, I'd been 2 years out of the divorce. I had written my book, Winning the War Within, about how to work through pain and how to come to a place of real forgiveness and how to set boundaries to become a whole healthy person. And so as I was writing that book, I was working for the school ministry. I was on Moral Revolution's board, which is a movement to help teach kids about sexuality and get them out of pornography, things like that, teach them dating, and plus raising kids on my own, plus being a school ministry pastor. I was working on 2 other books at the time, and also counseling people, because I've been a counselor since I was really, really young. And I just overloaded myself, got so overloaded, ended up in a nervous breakdown. I literally piled so much stuff on myself, plus dating Lauren, that I found myself in this crazy nervous breakdown. And that lasted, I lost the use of my arms and my hands for about a solid year. Like if I was to pick up a glass like this, for starters, I would shake, and then I'd have to use 2 hands because I lost all the strength in my hands in those years, in that year. And I would have 2 and 3 wet dreams a night, my body trying to cope with the crazy amounts of anxiety. And I didn't use masturbation to cope with it. I hadn't masturbated since I was 16. Since I literally wore that white shirt, I haven't masturbated even to this day, outside of like the marriage or whatever. That's not a part of my life, and pornography is not a part of my life. So when I got super overwhelmed with anxiety and even depression in my nervous breakdown, it was like my whole world again just completely shut down. It was worse than the divorce because of how powerless I felt. I was having nightmares. It was crazy. Like I woke up one night with demons standing in front of me. I could see them with my eyes, which you may not believe in that, which is fine with me. My first reaction was to kick them. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, "Whoa!" And I just kicked from my bed and I broke my toenail. I kicked right through and broke my toenail on my dresser. I just had these crazy experiences. And I ended up having to get on medication after fighting it for a year. That's why my body got so broke down, so depleted, was I just trying to get out from underneath this anxiety day in and day out. And it ended up, I had to get on medication, clonazepam and Lexapro, just to make it a fair fight. My emotions, my nervous system was so shot. And that was really a 5-year battle coming out of this nervous breakdown, getting on the medication, starting to get my life back. I had gotten married. So Lauren and I got married in 2011. And even after getting married, like I felt so weak. I'd gone from being like this strong, competent, firefighting guy, outdoorsman, hunt and fish my whole entire life, to like, I can't walk further than, I don't know, a couple hundred yards without my knees hurting. My hands shook. And this is like years after. This is like 3 years after my nervous breakdown. And I just went on this crazy journey of restoring my mind, becoming strong again as a man, and working myself out of this, like this being completely devastated. It was completely devastating. So that was about a 5-year journey of going from my nervous breakdown to like, okay, I feel like I'm getting my life back, and I feel like I'm getting on my feet again. But in that, right, you become medically dependent on the medication, even though I never abused it. And actually I only ever took half the dose that my doctor recommended for clonazepam. I was dependent upon that, and I hated it. So it took me, I was on that medication for 9 years before finally weaning all the way off of it, which was a miracle because it's just so hard to get off that medication. But that was a big breakthrough in my life. Lauren and I got a vasectomy reversal. I know what you're thinking, the snip, snap. Yeah, I went through that. So I got a vasectomy reversal at 31 because Lauren was, of course, an instant mom to my kids, but one of her greatest dreams was to have kids of her own. And so we just decided, before we got married, I told her like, yeah, I'm willing to get a reversal and just try to see what happens, because obviously there's no guarantees. Well, we end up trying to have kids for 5 years. So we dealt with 5 years of infertility. And most people think trying to have kids is super fun. Yeah, it's super fun for a couple of months. But once you try to have kids for 5 months and you can't have kids, and every month you think you're pregnant and then find out when she has her period that she's not pregnant, and it becomes this pain point. And then you begin to do all the testing behind, why is she not pregnant? And is it me? Is it her? Tracking ovulation cycles. This is probably more than you guys want to know, but this is just real life. This is what we go through. Super painful. So 5 years in to trying almost everything, Lauren finally gets pregnant, and she got pregnant on Father's Day, which just felt like this gift from God, right? Awesome. She's so excited. I'm so excited. And we go in on our 10-week checkup to finally see our baby, and there's no heartbeat. The baby died. Just so completely devastating. Definitely one of our biggest challenges for Lauren and I, having to have so many promises, so many words from God, and just in our heart together. And then all of a sudden to get breakthrough. We only had like a 3% chance of getting pregnant because of all the challenges that we've been through, and finally get pregnant on our own, and there's nothing. The baby dies. So we worked through that. It took us quite a while to work through that. But in, 2019, Lauren got pregnant again. We ended up going through and doing IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. We took a lot of time to process with God. Like, are you okay with this? Is this what we want to do? And yeah, it's such a massive process. If you've never done IVF, you don't want to. If you have to do IVF, there's definitely massive benefit to doing that. So we ended up having our baby, Edie. So in 2020, Edie was born a week before the pandemic happened, which was crazy because on one hand, like the whole world was in chaos and turmoil and confusion, and we bring this little life into the world. And the upside to it is I got to spend a whole year at home with my family and help Lauren, take care of the baby and learn. And so that was a massive upside. Thanks, COVID, for that. The downside is it was just such a hard year for everyone. You have a baby and you can't go out. You can't see your friends. You can't take them to church. You can't do anything like that. So that was an incredibly challenging season in our lives. And then 2021, my wife got pregnant again. So we just found out. No, we didn't find out. We found out months ago that we're having another baby. And that actually, we didn't have to do IVF for that. Again, we only have a 3% chance of getting pregnant, but we got pregnant on accident. And that was so awesome. The funny thing is I was telling Lauren, like, I'm not sure that I want to have any more kids. We already have 3 kids, plus we have Edie. And I was like, man, I'm getting old. I'm 40 years old. Like I should call it. I should just be thankful for what I have. And she was already pregnant. So I'd already been having conversations with Lauren, telling her, I'm not sure that we want to have more kids. And yeah, she was crying like, this is all I want to do. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm getting so old. Long story short, she called me from her parents' house in South Carolina, because that's where she was from. She was visiting them. And she's like, you're not going to believe this. I'm pregnant. So that was such a blessing. We're stoked. Lauren only has 4 weeks to go as of filming this, and we'll have another baby. So we're having a baby boy. Yeah, so we're so excited as a family, and this is just going to be an incredible season in our life. But, this has been such a wild journey. My life, I look at my life and I feel like I've lived 3 lives, right? I lived the life before I got married the first time, which was 18. And then I get married and have kids so young. That feels like one life. I go through my divorce, get remarried, go through all the addiction or the medical dependence, however you want to say it. I don't really care. Go through having kids, go through the miscarriage, then going through having kids. And it's crazy. My life, I've just have felt like I've gone through so much stuff. But the truth is that we all do. Life is a journey. Honestly, it's not a destination. You don't land anywhere. You just go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And for me, I've felt like my whole life, what I've wanted to do is to be able to take the things that I've been through, the gifts that my parents have given me, the gifts that other people have given me, and give them away. And I knew at a very, very young age that I wanted to help transform people back into their God-given identities, like David did his mighty men. If you don't know the story of David and his mighty men, you should go and look it up and read it. But David was on the run from Saul. He was on the run and fighting for his life. And, he was hiding with all these outcasts, these nobodies. And when these guys came and they hid with David, these murderers, these outcasts, they became these really incredible mighty men. And I remember my dad telling me that story at about 12 years old. And I told my dad, like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. I want to transform like these ordinary or these outcasts into what God had called them to. And so I've been holding on to that dream. That's what drove me at 13 years old. That's where I started to learn counseling is my dad told me, hey, you don't go to church for you. You don't go to youth group for you. You go because people need you. And that's where I started to learn the first steps, the first skills, and being a good listener and helping someone else out. Fast forward in 2018, we had a vision to start a men's movement to help restore the most fatherless generation in history, which is important for you to know. We live in the most fatherless generation in history that didn't come from our fathers dying in war. And when you grow up in a home where you don't have a dad, not because he died from war, but because he didn't want to be with you, the effects that fatherlessness has in our generation today is astronomical. What is going on because our fathers aren't there to protect, provide, promote, which is the role of a father in the family, is devastating. All the things that we would want to see changed in society, all the major effects in society, incarceration, addiction, the drug abuse, the fatherlessness, the violence, the abortion rate, you can link all of it back to fatherlessness. All the statistics you can link back to fatherlessness. And so we began to dream about, okay, if fatherlessness is the real pandemic, which is true, if you can heal a father, you can heal a family. And if you can heal a family, you can heal a nation. And so we started to look at, man, how do we change what's going on in society? And how do I partner? How do I continue this dream that I've had in my life since I was young to restore broken people back to their God-given identity? We started small. We started with a retreat in Texas, and that blew into really building out a discipleship model where we can help men get well and get trained and give back. And so that's what we do now. We have a 12-month discipleship program at BraveCo.org. We disciple men in 5 main categories in masculinity. So we do 12 weeks of masculinity. We do 12 weeks on sexuality and relationships, helping guys build healthy, strong relationships, break addictions. It's one of the things that we're incredible at. And then the next phase is wealth and provisions. So you got to know how to build wealth in your life. You got to know how to steward your money. You got to know how to build a wealth mindset. And then leadership and legacy. So guys from all over the country are being discipled every single week. We meet online every week, and I'm seeing families being restored. I'm seeing men get free of addiction. I'm seeing men learn how to live a whole healthy life. And it's just a fulfillment. What we're doing here at BraveCo is of a fulfillment of a dream that God put in my heart as a young boy, that's been prophesied over my life for years, that men have spoken over me, and other men that are a part of this. And it's a dream come true for me, sitting here today, taking all the just the crap that I've been through, all the downs, the hard things, the divorce, the addiction, the medication, the failed marriage, the addiction to pornography and masturbation, all of that, and to weaponize my story so that I can give a guy a leg up. I can give you the breakthrough that took me years to get, and that other people gave me. That's what I'm here for. That's what this podcast is about helping you to grow, is about sharing stories like mine and other men, is about helping to build strong families, helping to build strong communities, helping to restore the most fatherless generation in history. And we're going to do that. We're going to do that together. It takes men like you. It takes men who are willing to step up and to share what they've been through. It takes men to be courageous and face your own demons and own your story so that you can do the same. You could weaponize your story like mine, and you can not hide from it, not be afraid of it, not let it be used against you, but you can walk from where you're at today, maybe through some brokenness, maybe through some pain, maybe through some unforgiveness, maybe through some addiction, and you can get to the other side. So I'm super excited to be on this journey with each and every one of you. And I'll be unpacking different things in my story that I didn't have time to share today, or maybe I can go more in depth on that over the next few months, few years with you guys, and really get to a place of greater breakthrough and greater momentum in what we're doing. So I'm excited for that. Guys, thanks so much for listening today. It was great being with you. Have an incredible week.